So when we look at hypergamy, these are some of the things we can look at. But make no doubt about it, if you ignore that, it isn't going to last. No amount of wealth, fame, or power is going to be able to do it. Robert Pattinson is actually a running example. Here you have a rich, wealthy, successful, famous man loses a woman because she acted on sexual impulse. He wasn't providing it. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it fair, but this is what happens. People get bored, there's temptation, they're just not happy. And she acted out, ruined a relationship. All right. As we move on from the base core elements of those three, of working on yourself, developing yourself, screening and filtering your partner, and then working on the role of biology as being a critical component of relationship, we actually need to develop the vertical structure of our relationships. And these are going to have to be strong to withstand the cultural loads that we place on them and the dynamic loads placed within them, the relationship itself. And the primary of these are going to be three. There will be three of them. The relationship skills that we develop, the management skills that we develop within a relationship, and ultimately the maintenance skills that we develop within a relationship. Most men are not taught any of them, but they're all going to be familiar. None of these are going to be original. All right? When we talk relationship skills, you're going to want to take a self-assessment. You're going to want to look at what you're going to be able to look at and where you're at. You kind of know where you're at already. Look at your aptitudes. What are your studying and behavioral patterns like? Correcting those. All right? Then actually do an assessment of how you're interacting with other people. What is your social ability? Are you consciously aware, I would like to do one thing, but I'm not actually implementing? The third is actually going to be self-educating yourself. Physically educating yourself based on what you know is available. If you want to actually be more empathetic and you want to learn to imply active listening, actually looking and researching and documenting active listening skills. Finding those particular skills you want to learn about, document them, having a separate directory in your computer, noting and journaling. Taking a daily approach to utilizing those skills and recording your experiences of it. What you did well, what you didn't do well, self-regulate. All right. The last one on that is going to be taking a relationship autopsy. And this is when you actually looked at failed relationships, because failed relationships are an inflection point when your skills at that time were not sufficient enough to command a healthy relationship. Where you had problems, where you failed, underscored your lack of ability. Actively looking back at and reflecting upon those, what decisions were made because they were laced with value, tells you a tremendous amount, not only about yourself, but your skills and where you're at and what you could be working on. Analyzing those and self-educating is what you're going to have to do. We don't typically have coursework on this. Men are not taught that, so you have to self-educate. You have to relate with other men. All right. When we move on to management, and again, management is nothing more than an organized approach of people, resources, relationships, any number of things to have a desired objective. Going into a relationship, it is fundamental to know what is your objective. Ultimately, if you don't have a relationship objective, do not commit to one. Why are you committing to one if you don't have an objective? Most likely it's going to be because of a dependency need. You're exchanging sex for commitment, and you're not strong enough willed as an individual to stand on your own and live on your own in an autonomous way. And that is underlying a weak psychological structure. You're a weak individual. We need to beef up ourselves. We need to be willing to really differentiate. We really need to look and say no. We're not willing to exchange that. Women are the gatekeepers of sex. Men are the gatekeepers of commitment. Start controlling that gate. All right. Another part of relationships management is opening the lines of communication early. And it's not just communication, it's going to be communication in the critical realms of what does it mean to be in a committed relationship? What does it mean to be, your sexual involvement, your intimacy level, finances, friends, both mutual and shared. All the common relationship elements are going to be there, all right? And we're going to need to be looking at those as well. And there are a tremendous number of other drivers we need to evaluate and discuss openly. All right? And we need to take a healthy approach to this. Unfortunately, I've run a little bit long on it. The last thing I want to talk about is we need to be able to protect ourselves as men. I'm going to jump way ahead of my talk. And part of this is if we're looking at marriage, we need to look and realize that marriage as an institution is primarily an economic one. And based on that, we need to have an economic response to it, not a moral, not a cultural one. Part of that is preparing yourself for it. Absolutely, without a doubt. All right? The critics and pundits will sit down and say marriage is for the poor. Marriage is for men who can't afford the rent. Marriage is for men who can't afford the mortgage. Marriage is for men who need to share the financial burden of housekeeping. All right. Marriage is for people who can't afford retirement benefits or insurance benefits or child rearing capabilities. Men that can't afford, either through cost or by intellectual decree, the ability to outsource. The wealthy do, for cause. Based on all that, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but there's a strong argument for it. We need to protect ourselves. The first is going to be a prenuptial agreement is going to be a must, absolute must if you're going to protect yourself. And it's not just a security thing, it's framing a discussion of relationship. The problem with prenups is the fact that it only directs towards assets and property division and spousal support. Under no circumstances does it involve children or child custody, because it's up to, at the time, the child's best interest. So you cannot have a legal element in family law governing that. Not only that, lawyers and primarily judges are actually playing loose with some of the standards and actually waiving some of that off based on outlandish lifestyle agreements. The second thing I would entertain would be something that we're not seeing today, is that we actually formulate a partnership agreement, a legal structural element that you would see in case civil law of why you're being in the relationship. What's the point of this marriage? If it's child rearing and family development, state so. What are your obligations? What are the things you're going to be able to do? What are the things that you're providing and why? Treat it as such. For example, when we look at alimony, does it make sense that it's a 2-for-1 relationship as far as payment goes? For every 2 days you're with her, she gets a paid alimony. So you can imagine going to an employer, working 5 years for an employer and getting 2.5 years severance pay. That doesn't happen out in the economy, but it happens in family law. All right? Setting the tone against an economic standard would dramatically transform that. All right? The third one is I would look at putting incentives back into the marriage. All right? And these are going to be kind of subtle ones. I would sit down and say self-perform marriage insurance, where you both mutually add into the marriage based on a certain amount to actually augment the insurance on the damages that are included. The second one is under civil law, have civil penalties assigned to breaches of failure. We do it in business models. We should do it there. That would usurp the family law elements. And this goes for either sex. It needs to be mutually compatible. I'm not just talking from a man's side. The third one, which I find entertaining as hell, is actually put out a co-signing parental performance bond. Is her friends and family, particularly family, willing to co-sign the marriage agreement? Willing to put good money up, not as a dowry, but as a risk. People are willing to co-sign car loans for their child, co-sign mortgages for a loan, but we don't co-sign marriages. Why? Yet the first time the marriage is in trouble, when there's conflict, what happens? The social support network is saying, get out of that marriage. Take the kids, get the money, and get out.